Okay, so welcome everyone to today's AGP webinar, and thank you for taking the time to attend in obviously what is a very busy time for everyone. I'm Lisa James and I'm the AGP Office Administrator, and I'll be helping to facilitate the session today alongside Stephen Burt, who is our expert delivering the webinar, and I'll pass you over to him very shortly. Just before we do, just a couple of few housekeeping rules. If you can please ensure your microphone is muted to avoid any interference or background noise. There will be a question and answer session later in the webinar, at which point you can of course turn this back on. If you prefer, you can ask questions on the chat facility at the bottom, and Stephen will try to answer as many of these as possible at the end. And if you need support during the webinar, I'll be monitoring this chat. So if you have any problems, then please obviously just ask. While we're talking of chat, can I just ask you all to test your chat function by typing in your name in full so we can check off who was joined, as from yesterday we could see that some profile names or those who dialed in weren't very clear to us to be able to check who's attended this morning. The webinar is being recorded, which just helps us to collate any questions or comments which may be missed during the live webinar. And if anyone has any questions or concerns about this, then please do let us know. Following the webinar, you will receive 2 emails. We do require you to sign a digital registration form for the Welsh Government, which is our AG3, and you will receive an email from HelloSign, our e-signature platform, which will have a link on there. This literally takes less than a minute and is very easy to follow. It allows us to confirm to the Welsh Government that the webinar took place and how many people attended. And it's really important that you do sign this, and we will chase any missing forms. You'll also receive an email with a link to 2 surveys to provide feedback to us, so we can gather the information obviously that's needed that you're most aspiring at the moment. So we'd also ask you to please complete these if you could. So now I'll hand you over to our expert, Stephen Burt.
Thanks very much, Lisa. So, making sure. Right, so I can hear by the rust. There's a couple of people who aren't on mute yet. Are you currently seeing me on camera? Because I've got Lisa's phone signal showing. Yeah, you are. Thank you very much, David. Okay, so thank you, Lisa, for that introduction. And just to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me already, my name is Stephen Burt. I hate the title of expert because that implies that I've got more answers than perhaps I have. And I think the one thing to be assured of throughout this presentation is that there are a lot of questions, and if you're asking questions, you're not the only one. So as Lisa said, please do use that chat facility, and we'll do a combination of, we'll answer the questions we can, and then we'll also collect any of the feedback that we've got and pass those questions on. And there'll be a combination of questions that we haven't been able to answer yet, but also any issues that you are raising that we can forward on to government. Okay, so just by way of background, I qualified as a chartered accountant with Pricewaterhouse far too many years ago. I've then subsequently worked in a number of industries across South Wales, including doing some turnaround work and some startup work. Initially as finance director, and then latterly as a managing director. And then for the last couple of years, I've been working on the Accelerator Growth Programme as a business coach. A lot of that has been sort of cash modelling, financial forecasting, helping companies to apply for loans, but also some leadership development work and that sort of thing. So that's me, and we'll crack on with the slides. Just through the wonders of modern technology, this should all now work super effectively. Right, so what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to talk about some practical steps around cash management. We're going to look at the steps that you can undertake to start preparing a cash flow forecast. That's not to say, as a result of this 45 minutes, you're going to be wanting to do a fully costed sort of 5-year business plan, but hopefully some practical steps there. And actually in doing that, there is some valuable insight hopefully you can get from your business as well. And then towards the end, we'll also look at the government support packages that have been announced, and hopefully how you can access some of those. I would say that since the slides have been prepared, the Welsh Government have made some announcements around non-domestic rates or business rates, the full details of which haven't been published yet. And the UK government has announced that they are going to make an announcement today about support for self-employed. So it may be that if those are the areas that you're particularly interested in, that we have to do a sort of watch this space. What I would say is that there are lots of resources out there. Business Wales have a website which is updating regularly, and your relationship managers should also be, well, they're in various forums as part of the Accelerator Growth Programme, and hopefully will also be a source of communication. The intention is that this seminar, or an updated version of it, is run periodically. And whilst you may not want to listen to the whole thing all over again, there will be an update element of it that we can communicate. Okay. Just as Lisa said, please do use that chat function as we go through. Engagement's good for everyone, and I'll pause for reflection every so often. Lisa will keep an eye on the chats, and it'll also give you a chance to sort of process what we're going through. Just remember, you're investing your time in this. There are, I'm sure, lots of other things that you could be doing, and therefore, we are aiming for you to get some value out of being on this webinar. Thank you. The first thing to say is that that this is not a panacea. If you've got serious issues in the business where getting a bit of support or doing a little bit of thinking and structuring is not the comprehensive answer, then this is not the webinar which is going to solve that. However, within the Accelerator Growth Programme, we have got experts on recovery and business restructuring, and they are available to you. So if that's where you are as a business, then by all means stay on the webinar, but do then contact your relationship manager and ask for further help. Okay. So a couple of things just in terms of where to start. Well, the first thing to say is that good businesses will still be good businesses after the crisis. And most of the government activity is around making sure that businesses can transition from before to after with as smooth a transition as possible. But also, the things that are good will still be good. And some of this time can actually be used to help make them better. Okay? Time you spend now analysing your business is not going to be wasted. That's stuff that will stand you in good stead for the future. That proverb is sort of a well-known one, but it's one that may be particularly relevant for you at the moment. Are there things that you will do differently over the next few weeks and months which will actually carry on once the crisis is over? Are there things that will be better as a result? I know Mark's already shared how much he's enjoying working in his dressing gown this morning. And is that going to become a feature of the new normal for him? So we'll launch into the first of those three sections, which is practical steps. So the first thing to say is don't go it on your own. Both from a personal well-being point of view and from a not the best thing for your business point of view. There are other people around who are happy to talk, to support, and can actually add some value to the process. So the first group I've talked about there is your staff. Leslie ran a webinar yesterday specifically focusing around employee issues, both in terms of how to work with them, how to support them, but also some of the government schemes. that will be available subsequent to this webinar. And so if you didn't get a chance to listen yesterday, then I encourage you to do so. I've heard some very good feedback from it already. So Lisa will probably communicate towards the end how you're going to be able to access that. Bear in mind, they are concerned. They are nervous themselves, and so communication is really important to them. But secondly, when you do come to look at your business, when you do come to look at the cash flow implications, what has to change, then they will have useful input as well. And don't be afraid to ask for that. Next group is the banks. Not necessarily everybody's first assumption as to the group that is going to be really helpful to you, but in terms of cash, they have it, and quite often you like it. We'll talk a bit more about the government schemes towards the end, but bear in mind the banks themselves also have a lot of tools around business support, and individually they also have a number of schemes that can help as well. So do engage with your bank manager. I know that's often hard in terms of phone contact, but if you've got an email or if you can use the web contacts, they are responding, albeit a little bit slower perhaps than we'd all like. Okay, and then the third group there to stay in touch with is your clients. I think we've all learned the value of web conferencing over the past couple of weeks. If you haven't, there are a lot of good tools out there. I won't profess to be the expert. I think I've used Skype, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Google Hangouts, WhatsApp, and Zoom in the last week. And Microsoft Teams as well. So that's sort of seven that I'm not advertising. Interestingly, time is different now as well, isn't it? We're not spending as much time traveling. And whilst we've all got lots of pressures on our time, there is time to spend with other people, albeit online. You've still got to drink coffee, you've still got to have lunch. Finding new ways to engage with those clients is really important. It gives them reassurance, it builds relationships, and they're the ones who are going to be there for you, or who you're going to need to be in relationship with at the end of this. So don't go silent on them for the next 3 months. Do stay in touch with them. Next practical steps, cash. It's a cliche, but very few businesses are going to be worrying about what their profits are over the next 3 or 4 months. Most of them will be worried about whether there's enough cash in the business to keep them alive. And that's the thing to concentrate on. Practically, in terms of this, it's money going in, money going out. So are you speaking to those who owe you money? Understanding whether they are going to be paying you, when they're going to be paying you. And then challenge for you, I suppose, with each of your customers is understanding really where they sit in terms of your ongoing relationships with them. Are there ones where you need to be the one offering them the support, but equally some of them, can they help get you money? Every business is going to be slightly different as to what its current cash situation is, but also what access it has to cash going forwards. And engaging in that conversation is really important. Don't be afraid to ask for money to come in earlier, but equally bear in mind a number of them will also be asking for extended terms because they may not have access to cash themselves. And understanding which of those categories each of your debtors in will actually give you good insight when we come into cash management, but also in that context of relationship build, it's really important. The next group, sort of more about cash going out, I suppose, the supplier base. Don't be afraid to ask for terms. If you were a valued customer of theirs before the crisis, they'll still want you as a valued customer after the crisis. They may be in a better cash position than you are. So, make the ask. but also start to think about which are your key long-term suppliers. You know, are they still trading? You know, in terms of your ongoing business, do you have dual sourcing available? You know, it's often the sort of question that doesn't get asked until there's a problem. So, you know, have a think about all your suppliers, understand what your own supply chain looks like, both in terms of the cash impact and also the relationship impact. And then finally, on the cash in and out government, as I say, we'll talk about this as a sort of separate section, but most of payments to government can be deferred. You know, whether that's VAT, they've announced a 3-month payment holiday, whether that's HMRC in terms of PAYE or corporation tax, they've basically announced that the time to pay scheme will be enhanced and made more favourable, if you like. So, you know, don't think in terms of having to make government payments as being a given in the way that perhaps it has been in the past. And finally, the development bank, again, you know, they've announced repayment holidays for people. So look at those spends that you've currently got scheduled and work out which one of them you really need to be doing now and which ones you don't. And then also on an upside, you know, is there ways to get money sooner? You know, if perhaps some aspects of your business are not progressing as much, then, you know, can you do tax returns earlier if you're making a loss? Are there research and development tax credits that you can apply for? If your expenditure is greater than your income, then your VAT return will actually be cash coming in. So, you know, are you making sure all those claims are being done on as timely a basis as possible? Okay, so first pause. So thinking through those practical steps, have a little think for yourself and generate a sort of almost a list of actions as you're coming out of this webinar. Here are the things that I can proactively do that I think would be worthwhile for me to do. So are there any of those actions that you need to commit to doing for yourself? Talking to your staff, talking to the banks, clients, scheduling and prioritizing cash, your debtors and creditors conversations, and any payments related to government. Have a little think for your own business. And just give you a minute on that one. A couple of questions just going through on the chat. Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Quite right, on the VAT, you do have to still do your return, even if you don't have to pay it. Fran, my understanding is that it's the payment that was due to be made in respect to the March period that's deferred to June. Mark, quite right. I mean, the interest rates are are a challenge. Nobody's publishing exactly what they are. There is a general statement that they should be low, given that the government are putting 80% guarantees behind them. But we're not seeing any evidence either way yet. And in fact, one of the things which has sort of kicked off on social media even this morning is that a lot of the banks are still asking for personal guarantees obviously around the 20%. But what that effectively means is that they're asking for personal guarantees first, and the government only provides a backup afterwards. So there's a lot of challenge to the banks on social media today, and also sort of official lobbying channels as well, as to whether that's fair, and so in the spirit of what was announced from the government. As soon as I hear...
It's hard to hear. I think it's breaking up quite a lot. I don't know. And a few were commenting on the side saying that they're losing the sound intermittently.
Right. Okay. Apologies for that. I haven't had any problems previously when we've been doing these. So,
it's clear now. It's a couple of times. Right. I don't know.
Okay. I can see that one...
Mark thinks it's a thinking pause, apparently.
Right. Okay. As soon as I hear the banks making announcements around interest or awarding any interest, I'll share that just so people get an idea. My understanding was that the VAT postponement was going to be automatic. I recognise your question there on a direct debit, but I thought that they weren't going to. We'll capture that as a question and feed it back directly. The questions are going in faster than I'm getting down them. Adrian's asked the same question about direct debit. I'll get that submitted as a formal question to HMRC, and we'll get the answers out through the AMs. If you can note that one down, Lisa, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, are we now sharing the correct screen as well? Somebody else said I had the next slide view screen showing by mistake, so apologies for that. So.
You're on practical steps, take a minute.
Yeah, but it's all on full screen though now, yeah? That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next section then, which is a cash flow forecast. So again, just to reiterate, this is not about me educating you in 30 seconds how to prepare a full 5-year business plan. If that's what's needed, then you need to contact your relationship managers and arrange for a package to be done. But hopefully what we'll do in the next few minutes is look at some simple ways that you can start that process. And hopefully in doing that, you will actually also gain some useful insight into your business as well. Okay, so short term, very simple. What money have you currently got? What are you going to collect? And what will you have to pay? And the thinking you've already done on your debtors and suppliers should inform that. Silly thing to say in some ways, but try to stick to that. The temptation is always to just respond to whoever phones first. In sticking to that plan, it buys you the time to take the next steps. If all you're doing is sort of just reacting all the time, then that becomes quite a challenge for you. And then in terms of putting together a cash flow forecast in the medium term, bear in mind that this is a useful thing for you to do. As a business, it's worth having a business plan, a cash forecast. If you need to go out and get funding, then it's going to be necessary. But even if you don't, it's going to be useful. So this is just sort of the sort of chunks, if you like, of information which will go towards putting a cash plan together. If you do end up needing further support, then having done this thinking in advance will make that a lot easier. So start with products and services. And bear in mind, this is a good time to sort of actually step back and look at it and go, which of my products, which of my services are actually good for me to be doing? You know, should I be doing some rationalization? Should I be focusing on certain areas? You know, and there's different ways of thinking about what your best ones are. You know, which ones are generating the high volumes? You know, are there a long tail of products that are generating hardly any income? One of my previous companies, the turnaround I did, there was over 700 products, and when we looked at it, 60% of them only contributed 2% of the gross profit. And you kind of go, so we could rationalize 400 products without losing hardly any gross profit. You know, and there are always reasons why you might carry on doing them, but don't be afraid to look at it and go, what do I concentrate on? You know, is it the volume? Is it the value? Is it the profit? Is it the reputation? And should I be rationalizing some of them? Once you've done that, as long as you've got a good understanding of what those products actually cost you, the cost of sales, you know, just is a direct relationship. Whatever your sales are, the cost of those is the next step. Just bear in mind that when you look at this cost of sales bit, divide up your costs between those that directly relate to sales, and therefore if you're not making any sales, they will be zero. Yeah. The temptation is always to mix up costs that you're going to be incurring anyway with the cost of sales. If you do that, then what you end up with is underestimating what your baseline of cost is in the event that sales go down, and vastly overestimating it. Well, okay. Staffing. Again, this is about lining those up with your sales. So it's not the other way around. The staffing plan shouldn't be how many have I currently got or how many can I afford. It should be for the sales that I'm forecasting to make, what do I actually need? Yeah. And then, yes, there will be a plan as to how you get to that number. Whether you've got to go out and recruit 250 people or whether you need to lose a couple of people, you plan how to get there. But this is about a medium-term plan now, not a what does it cost me tomorrow. Okay. Yes, it's worth sense checking it against your current staffing. And obviously when I say, you know, needs to line up the sales, that doesn't mean you forget the finance team. Very important team. Definitely don't leave them. And also don't forget to add on 15% to cover your national insurance and pension contributions. Okay. And overheads, it's everything else. And you have to spend this regardless of your sales. But in doing that, in collecting what these are, it's a good opportunity to better understand your cost base. At this stage, what I would suggest is, regardless of any deferments that you're planning, regardless of anything where you're not planning on spending it in the short term, put it in now, and then when we translate it into cash, the first year may differ. But you know, a good understanding of what your cost base is a useful thing to do, and there may be things that you can reduce. You know, have you found that actually working from home has been good for some of your staff, and therefore perhaps you don't need to expand your offices quite as quickly as you thought? Are you able to, you know, do a lot more by video conferencing, and therefore your travel budget can reduce? You know, some of the things that we previously assumed were a given may not be now. So, and then finally, translate that into cash. So when you go through your P&L, you then start asking yourself the questions that turn P&L into cash. When do people pay you? You know, is it 30 to 60 days, or do they all pay you immediately? When do you pay other people? You know, is it 30 days after they invoice you, or are they demanding cash straight away? VAT, it's 20% of your P&L, and it's paid quarterly. So again, we touched on that earlier on. If you're in a net cash outflow point of view, VAT is an income. If you're in a net cash inflow point of view, then VAT is a payment. PAYE, normally 1 month after salary. Again, deferment opportunities now. Rent, is that quarterly? And especially some of these quarterly payments, it's worth just tracking those, because what you don't want to do is, you know, find that you do well for 2 months and then suddenly you're struggling a month through. And then there'll be things that are not part of P&L. So, you know, are there capital expenditures that you need? Are there loan repayments that are not part of P&L? So, you know, I know that's a very simplistic run through of what a cash flow forecast consists of, and the structure of preparing one. And that you may not feel that that's equipping you for actually preparing one yourself. But what you'll find is that in doing that, you're asking yourself some really valuable questions. And if you then do need help putting together a business plan, you'll have asked yourself and answered, hopefully, a lot of the questions on the way. Okay. The next thing and final thing to do on that is make adjustments for the current situation. So banks are asking for pre-crisis numbers when they do their business interruption loans. They've basically been asked to appraise businesses as to their viability before the outbreak, and therefore that's what they should be weighing your loan application on. And as I said before, the plan will actually be useful for future planning. Okay. What that will then tell you is what you actually need. And bear in mind that loan or equity is not the only answer. I was working with a client last year, and they were thinking that they would have to go out and raise £100,000 in equity. The business was probably only worth about 200 at that time, so they were talking about having to give away 50% of their business. When we actually looked at it and realised that most of what they needed was the working capital to buy equipment, they actually entered into a relationship with their preferred supplier. Their preferred supplier gave them 12 months credit in return for 5% of the company. And so suddenly, instead of having to give away 50% for exactly the same outcome, they only gave away 5%, and they built a long-term relationship with the supplier. So, but a good understanding of the situation, good understanding of your forecast, where your cash needs are, what you're going to do with them, will help with that. So again, a quick take a minute, which will give me a chance to look through the the chat. Have a think for yourself. You know, have you already got a cash flow forecast? Once you've done these steps yourself, will you then want help preparing one? Are there insights that you can glean in the meantime? And are you going to end up short of cash? So have a little think about those things. Just two extra comments on the chat while we've been going through that. Adrian has confirmed that he's been told that those who've got their VAT on direct debit, the money won't be taken. And then Mark has suggested that probably when we talk about short term, you're probably talking about 12 weeks. You know? I think that's sensible in the current climate. I think that's sort of the horizon that people are being sort of challenged to think differently around, and understanding how you can get through that 12-week period is useful. I think it'll also show you whether you need to get longer term finance, and it'll allow you time to get loans and things like that. Okay. So just another minute or two just to think through that cash forecast. I'm conscious we ended up starting a little bit late, so if people are happy for it to run on for sort of 10 minutes or so at the end, then that's fine. So the final section now we're looking at is government support. And as I said, this is changing, literally daily. And I will be trying to stay abreast of all those things. A number of, as I say, Business Wales are being very good. The Federation of Small Businesses, if you're a member of the Chamber of Commerce, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales are, these are all organisations that are collecting this information as best they can and trying to disseminate it. The Business Wales link is actually not a bad one, because that then also has feeds into the other areas as well. If you type in Business Wales, Corona advice for businesses, then there's a link there to up-to-date information. And that's being updated not necessarily every day, but certainly every few days. And if there's any urgent announcements, we'll also try and keep the relationship managers up to date as well. So in terms of existing loans, so if you've already got a loan, the Development Bank have offered a 3-month repayment holiday. If you've got equity with them, that applies to your monitoring fees, but you do need to apply. So you go onto the Development Bank website, you download an application form, and you'll get a 3-month repayment holiday. The commercial banks, I've been monitoring the big 5. I can't remember which one it was. 4 out of the 5 have specifically got provisions in place. They don't, that's not binding in the way that the Development Bank is, but they've all said that they will consider repayment holidays. And then others, things like finance houses, things like that, there's nothing published for them, but certainly worth making a phone call. Okay. Going forward, then the business interruption loan scheme. At the time of writing, different banks have different processes. So, for example, Lloyd's have a online application form where you can download it and you make the application, whereas Barclays have a sort of 7-question eligibility criteria, and then if you get to the end, it then says contact the bank. So, likewise with the 80% guaranteed by government, some of the stuff I've seen this morning around that, RBS have said that they will not be asking for personal guarantees, whereas both Barclays and HSBC have said that they will. The rule is you should go to your own bank first, but you are then allowed to go to other banks afterwards. Okay. And there are repayment holidays at the front end of these. Again, the official line was 12-month repayment holidays. I've seen some people talk about 6. That's one of the things that's changing. So rather than me put generic statements in, what I'd suggest you do is, whichever your bank is, just make sure you understand what their offer is. Business rates. So I've got a little chart published on the right-hand side there. That's a flow chart that the Vale of Glamorgan produced. The first thing is, do you know what the rateable value of your business is? That web link there is to the valuation office. You can literally type in your postcode, all the available properties in that postcode come up. You can click on yours, and that will tell you what your rateable value is. Why that's important is because that has a direct bearing on what support you can get. Broadly speaking, the two support levels are all small businesses, regardless of sector. If you're in a property which is a less than £12,000 rateable value, you will already not be paying rates, and you will qualify for a £10,000 grant. That will be administered directly by your local authority without you having to apply for it. Okay. If you are in the retail, leisure or hospitality sector, then if you have a rateable value between 12 and 51, then the 1 year rates holiday has been, a rates holiday has been extended to you as well, just for a year, and there's a £25,000 grant that will be administered. The Welsh Government announced yesterday that the higher end retail, leisure and hospitality businesses will not be getting the same holiday as the UK, because the Welsh Government is wanting to generate a rates relief pot with a view to making it available for non-retail, leisure and hospitality businesses between 12 and 51,000. That has not been announced yet. They announced yesterday that that was their intention, but they haven't announced what that actually looks like. So if that's the category that you're in, then definitely, pay good attention to any announcements on business rates today. Okay. VAT, tax deferment in general. So VAT, we've talked about the 3-month deferment. You don't need to apply for that, as Adrian confirmed for us now. HMRC, you do need to apply. It's their time to pay scheme. It will be considered on a case-by-case basis, but they've been told to be more sympathetic than they have been in the past. So, if you are self-employed, as I say, there are due to be major announcements today. So far, the announcements have been, one, that your self-assessment tax bill won't be payable until 31st of January. And then the second thing they've said is that the access to the benefits will be accelerated. And obviously the universal tax credit has been boosted by £1,000 a year as well. But anything relating to those employee benefits, you're better off listening to Leslie's webinar. The two sort of main staff cost announcements: statutory sick pay, increased entitlement as to who is eligible for it and how quickly they become eligible. And obviously that's helpful for employers as well, in terms of being able to reclaim it. And then the job retention scheme. Government will reimburse 80% of the wage cost up to £2,500 a month. There's not clarity yet, and I have asked the question as to whether that's net or gross wages. And secondly, it's at employer discretion whether they pay the additional 20% or not. So you can send somebody home, get the government 80%, that's what they receive, and they receive a lower salary, or you can choose to top up their salary to their normal amount. On the basis that you're topping them up to their normal amount, I was assuming that it was net pay, but as I say, we have asked the question, and once that answer is confirmed, we'll let you know. The one thing to say is that in order to do that, the worker must be furloughed, which basically means they're not allowed to be answering emails, phone calls, etc. How that's enforced, I don't know, but the principle is there. If you do need to then contact somebody who is on furlough and effectively require them to work for a period, then you have to pay them for the period that they work. And obviously, depending on the nature of your contract with them, if they're an hourly paid employee, you pay them by the hour. If they're a weekly paid employee, you pay them for the week, etc. There's obviously not clarity yet as to what that actually means in terms of monthly paid employees. If you just need to contact them for an hour, I think that the general expectation is that it's a reasonable approach that will be taken. But that's not a binding comment. Okay, so very much a quick canter through government support. There are other places that you can go to for that. Quick summary of the housekeeping pieces, whilst you feverishly had any of your chat questions. You will be receiving an AG3 through from Winning Pitch. It will need to be digitally signed, and that's basically evidence to the Welsh Government that the webinar's been held and is hopefully useful. The second thing will be that you'll receive an email from Winning Pitch, which will have 2 links. One is a feedback form for this webinar. As I say, we're hoping to repeat it next week, unless you all say it was a complete waste of time and effort, and Steve should never be let near a camera or a screen again, in which case that would be very useful feedback. And, secondly, there is a Business Wales COVID-19 survey as well, which again is capturing what issues you're facing, what further support is needed, all that sort of stuff. So that'll be a really useful piece of information that Business Wales will feed directly back into government. I've been asked to put aside a few days next week, and if as a result of this seminar, what you'd like to do is to have a one-to-one chat with me, then that's available to you. So the process will be, let AGP know that you'd like, Winning Pitch know that you'd like that. We'll schedule a 1-hour call without sort of putting all the work package process together. And then if as a result of that, you want a further block of work, either by myself or one of the other coaches, then the relationship, you'd contact the relationship manager and go back through the normal work package process. But basically, if you just want an hour to chat through anything that we've covered today or anything else that you think I might be able to help with, then you can schedule that hour outside of the work package process. Okay. So I'm just going to have a quick look at the chats again. So, Mark, do you want to just take yourself off mute and just explain that question a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry, Mike, this wasn't at all clear. I've spoken to a couple of the smaller finance houses because obviously the government advice was not to talk to anybody other than your own main bank. With the Accelerated Growth Program companies, obviously, we were the ones that were looking to basically grow from a certain level to 2 million within a very short space of time. Now, pre-COVID, the numbers of companies that were started that go to a scale-up scale of like 3 million was, I think it was 0.04%. So the banks were facing basically a 99.6% certainty of if you invest in that company, it's not going to reach that thing. With COVID, obviously, the banks are still looking for security. And even that word, when the entire economy is shut down, is inappropriate because there is essentially no certainty in prices, in commodity values, in logistics, in economics, in social structure. So I've identified, and I think it's quite clear that the businesses on Accelerated Growth Program are having to go to Development Bank. They're still insisting on 6 to 12% interest for existing loans. They've not been set up for doing this new funding. So I'll give you a number on that. Since its inception, with all the subsidy, with everyone on salary, with all the facilitation work, Development Bank of Wales has only lent out 1.5 billion. The commercial paper that was announced last week that no one can access is 350 billion. I'll give you another number. I also have an Irish company that's sleeping. I thought Brexit panic, I'll try and set that up. I got a minister from their letter from their minister. In Ireland, the total fund that's equivalent to this 350 billion one is 300 million. So my concern is that in the facilitatory aspects of government, there's not really any realistic sense of how do we actually look at this. Now, I understand this 350 billion is the analogous to the D-Day landings. You know, like we have to get all boats, all limited companies out there, and everyone, small or big, has a part to play. However, it's no point sending them out if they're taking on water to start. So as I understand it, your 12 weeks is very important for the commercial banks, for them to see which ones are going to go under without the emergency loan. Yeah. The other bit in terms of how they get there, you know, they have no risk lending this money as far as I can see, apart from the fact that they're fixing interest rates. So, you know, it's very difficult. What would be useful would be for AGP to link up with the development bank, and for the development bank to be able to provide some of the emergency funding. Likewise, a lot of small businesses, I mean, I had to open a Barclays account because Tide couldn't do international payments, and Tide don't do any lending whatsoever. It took 3.5 weeks to open a Barclays account, just a simple account. And people are calling for mortgages. They're on the phone for 6 hours. There is no contact at the commercial banks whatsoever unless you've got a personal contact. Yeah. The larger companies, they've got more skin in the game. The banks want to get their money back, even if it's fiat money. So I think that's me. I couldn't have typed that in. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm not sure there's an answer to the question, but I think awareness of the issue is important and is good. What I would say is that the development bank fast track loans are still being processed quite quickly. I had one application went in last week, and they had a response within 24 hours. Yes, they are still lending on pre-commercial, pre-COVID terms, which obviously is not as good, hopefully, as the business interruption loans will be. But in terms of sort of access to emergency cash, that is there. And the other thing that a number of businesses have done is got hold of the banks and agreed an extension of their overdrafts. So most of the commercial banks have agreed to waive arrangement fees for extensions of overdrafts. So again, that might provide short-term liquidity, which will enable you to have the time to go through the loan application process. But I certainly agree that accessing the chunks of cash and the loan processes is a slow aspect of what's been rolled out. I think the chancellor's aware of that as well.
I mean, one of the things we were supposed to be doing was growing new value. You know, so there is a lot of new value in the economy. So, for example, we're in food, and the food business was based on 50% imports, 80% of the sales through supermarkets. The main buyer at Tesco doesn't even heard of innovative products, and 5 to 6% of the value is going to direct producers. In food, which is a key industry now, and we can get key workers. So whilst we can work, not lots of other companies can't. We've got no direct support whatsoever for the opportunity, because opportunity funding is different from bailout funding. And for the AGP things, we should really have been in the opportunity business rather than this, you know, because if you've not lost a lot of revenue, which we haven't because we're a smaller business, we're actually not particularly adversely affected insofar as much that now we can't follow through on our growth plans, which was the purpose of AGP.
Okay, thank you. Murrig knows the answer. I haven't heard of anybody who's managed to get a business interruption loan through from the commercial banks yet. In the same way as my comment about interest, we are actively, following any of the applications that have been made. And once something, I will try and share that with you. David has made a comment that the grant officers, especially for Smart Cymru, and I think probably Innovate as well, have been told to accelerate claims. And so that's a piece of good news if that's where you are. Nicola, the furloughed portal, I'm afraid I'm not up to speed on that. What I will do after this call is I will get that question through to Leslie Rossiter, who's leading on HR. She was answering questions very quickly this morning, so hopefully we'll get an answer across to you on that. Lisa can coordinate that. Yeah.
Sorry, so I suppose the request would be, is what would it take for AGP, because you've done a lot of the passport, by passporting, I mean that you've done a lot of the due diligence, the companies that are on the AGP program, that's been done. So it should give the banks further satisfaction, but at the moment it doesn't carry any premium whatsoever. Like when you speak to the bank, they don't know what the AGP program is. There's no press. There's no, we really need somebody who knows what that is, perhaps, because I think it is a mark of quality within Wales, isn't it? If you've been assessed as having been a company that was expected to grow by 2 million.
Yeah, very much so. I think, Mark, in terms of that, that's probably something for us to take up separately within Winning Pitch. I know Lisa has got calls arranged with people like Richard and Steve later on today, and Tara. So we will feed that in and see whether there's something that can be done to sort of help try and fast track. I think the reality is that the commercial banks are holding the cards on this. They are hiding behind perhaps a veil of activity, and the fact that you can't get hold of them is a challenge in itself. Adrian shared my comment on about the overdrafts. There was an overdraft extension granted within a week, but then they have actually submitted or prepared an application for a loan, but haven't heard back yet. Diane's actually answered the previous question about the portal. It's expected to go live on the 16th of April. Okay. Good. And so I know most of the questions have probably been done through the chat. We will save that group chat and turn it into a Q&A internally. If there is anybody who wants to ask a question, just sort of, I'll give you a minute to unmute and ask it. But otherwise, I'll just put a quick summary, a reminder that you'll be getting the emails through from Winning Pitch after this. Please do sign to confirm you've attended, and please do put some feedback. As I say, the idea is to make this webinar as useful as possible. Good businesses will still be good after the crisis, and the goal is to get through this. Time spent analysing your business will not be wasted, and do look for improvements in your business in this challenging time, and perhaps there may be things you can learn. Silly to say, but don't ignore the problem. The ostriches will not be the ones who succeed through this, but equally don't panic. There is help available, and try and make use of the changed circumstances. So all that leaves is for me to thank you all for joining the webinar. Hopefully you found it useful, and I'm sure I'll speak to many of you next week.